A private pair of hearing aids can cost around £4,000, sometimes more, sometimes less. The thing to remember though is the mistakes often happen before anything ever goes in your ears. I'm Adam Bostock, founder of Alto Hearing, and my background is working as an audiologist. And by the end of this video, you'll know the 5 buying mistakes that make a premium pair of hearing aids disappointing and the questions I'd ask before you sign up to anything. So the thing that people get wrong is they assume a bad experience with hearing aids means a bad hearing aid. Sometimes it does, but usually the hearing aid is absolutely fine. It's just part of a wider array of issues. The wrong problem, wrong expectations, a rushed fitting, or a lack of follow-up. Or maybe the tiny detail that nobody asked about because everybody was too busy talking about technology or brands. And then 3 weeks later, the hearing aids are in a drawer. Now, when people say hearing aids are expensive, the term expensive usually means low value. And I think premium hearing aids, even if they're high cost, can be absolutely fantastic value. But when they're sat in a drawer, well, yeah, that's expensive. So, mistake number 1. Shopping for the best hearing aid. People love to ask, what's the best hearing aid? I get it. If you're spending thousands, you want to buy the right thing. If I'm buying something, I tend to go on Which or look at reviews and forums. It's natural and yeah, usually pretty sensible. But for hearing aids, it's the wrong first question because, well, best for what? Best for sitting with one person in a quiet room, best for restaurants, best for meetings, maybe best for someone who can't handle small batteries, best for someone who wants Bluetooth. Different problems, different answers. In clinic, we will often hear people saying, I can hear people talking, I just can't make out the words. And that sounds specific, but actually it's fairly broad. And something we teach to students is to delve much deeper than that. Where does that happen? Sunday lunch, the car, work, grandchildren speaking from another room while facing a cupboard. Before anybody talks about brands, write down the 3 situations you most want to improve. Not my hearing. You need to be really specific here. Write down things like, I want to follow conversations at a Sunday lunch, or I want to stop pretending in restaurants, or I want to hear my partner in the car. Now, if the recommendation provided by your clinician then doesn't clearly connect to these situations, be really careful. That's how people buy a technically good hearing aid for a badly defined problem. Mistake number 2, comparing the price, not the care. Now then, 2 quotes can look really similar. Same brand, same technology level. One is £2,500 and one is £4,000. So the obvious question is, why is that one more expensive? And it's a fair question that people ask all the time as they look at hearing aids online and see websites much cheaper than they've been quoted in a clinic. But the answer might not be the hearing aid. It might be the time. It might be the fitting process. It might be the follow-up, or it might be the repairs, the warranty, the review appointments, or whether you can actually speak to the person who fitted them when something isn't right. Private hearing care isn't one thing. Buying online is different from a home visit. A high street chain is different from an independent clinic. And even 2 independent clinics can work very differently. Now, I'm not saying one is automatically good and one is automatically bad. That's just too simple. But if you're comparing quotes, compare the care around the hearing aids, not just the hearing aids. Now, it might sound like an easy thing for someone to just boost the price up by saying it includes care, but I promise you, with hearing aids, care is important. Hearing aids go wrong. They break, they need adjusting, and your hearing changes. So ask, what happens after the fitting? How many appointments are included? Who adjusts them? What happens if I can't get on with them? Are repairs included? What happens in a year if my hearing changes? Now, if someone can explain that clearly, that's good. If they can't, I wouldn't necessarily run out of the building, but I'd put the pen down for just a moment. Quotes that are unclear are where people get caught out. It's not always that someone is trying to do anything wrong. Sometimes it's just that hearing care is being sold like a product, when actually the care model is the thing that you're going to be living with. Mistake 3, assuming programming is the same as fitting. Now, this bit is a little bit more technical, but it's one of the places people lose clarity without realizing it. When a hearing aid is fitted, the software gives a starting point. That's all really, a starting point. The computer hasn't met your ear. It doesn't know the exact shape of your ear canal, the way the aid sits in it, the acoustics, or what actually reaches your eardrum. It has a very educated guess, but it's still a guess. And that's where real ear measurement can be really useful. All that means is we're measuring what the hearing aid is actually doing in your ear rather than just trusting what the software says it's doing. So two people can have the same hearing aid and the same hearing test result and still get a different amount of sound at the eardrum. If speech sounds are too low, you might hear more noise but not more clarity. And if they're too high, the world can feel sharp, harsh, tiring, and just a bit too much. That's when someone says, I tried hearing aids and they were awful. And sometimes they were, but more often than not, the answer is they just weren't fitted accurately enough yet. Before you sign up to anything, ask, how do you check the fitting is right in my ears? Not just, will you ask me how it sounds? Of course, we ask how it sounds. I'm not suggesting we ignore the person wearing them. That would be a fairly bold clinical strategy. But if you're spending thousands of pounds, the technical side should be checked properly as well. You don't want the first proper test of your hearing aids to be in a noisy restaurant 3 days later when you're sitting there just smiling politely and catching one word in every 7. Mistake number 4. Treating the first fit like the finished result. This is where quite a lot of people are lost after what looked like a perfectly normal appointment. Even if the audiologist explains it and attempts to manage expectations properly, people still often think the fitting appointment is the moment the hearing aids are done. It isn't. The first fitting gets you started. Then real life gives us the useful information. At home, the kettle might sound too sharp, or in the car, the indicator might suddenly be the loudest thing in the world. In a cafe, cutlery might become deeply irritating for you, or your own voice might sound strange. And then the family say, but can you hear better? Which is not quite the whole point. Yes, we want you to hear better, but we also need the hearing aids to be wearable, because if they're technically improving your hearing, but you hate wearing them, then the outcome is still poor. That's what the follow-up is for. The first couple of weeks should produce notes. Where did they help? Where did they annoy you? Where did you take them out? Where did you say they're fine because you didn't want to be a nuisance? And that last one is pretty common, actually. People don't want to complain. They don't want to feel difficult. They don't want to admit that they haven't worn them as much as they were told to by the audiologist. So they stop coming back, and then 6 months later, the hearing aids are living next to the reading glasses and an old phone charger. Before you buy, ask what the follow-up actually looks like. When do I come back? What do we review? Who do I contact if something feels wrong? Do you adjust for real life situations, or are we just hitting and hoping for the best? If follow-up is vague, treat that as part of the quote, because you're not just buying the first appointment. You're buying what happens when the first appointment needs improving. Mistake 5, ignoring the thing that will stop you wearing them. This is probably the most human one out of all the mistakes, and it's often the one that people are least honest about. They don't like how they look. They can't get them in easily. They don't like their own voice. They find the app annoying. They don't want rechargeable. They do want rechargeable, but forget to charge everything. Their glasses get in the way. They feel old. Their family pushed too hard. Or they've spent more than they were comfortable with, so every tiny irritation now feels like proof that they've made a bad decision. This is what I call the draw reason. Before you buy, ask yourself, what would make me stop wearing these? And be honest. If visibility bothers you, then say it. If fiddly things bother you, say it. If you don't want anything connected to your phone, then say it. If you're only there because your daughter booked the appointment and sprung it on you, say that as well. Because the best hearing aid is not the one with the longest feature list. It's the one you will actually wear. If this was my parent, I'd care far more about what they'll tolerate every day than whether the brochure has a slightly better comparison table. So, before you buy hearing aids, I'd split the questions in two. There are questions for the clinician. What situations are we trying to improve? What is actually included in the quote? How will the fitting be checked in my ears? What happens after the first fit? And then there's one question for you, which is just as important. What is most likely to stop me wearing them? Now, if the clinic can answer their bit clearly and you can be honest about yours, that's a good sign. If the conversation keeps drifting back to brands and technology, then I'd stop comparing brands at that point, because the painful part isn't just wasting money, it's telling your family, I tried hearing aids and they didn't work. It's avoiding the restaurant again. It's sitting through another meal pretending that you've followed more than you have. It's the little moment that someone says, never mind, and changes the subject. That's the bit people actually remember, and none of that is solved by choosing a brand name on its own. Premium hearing aids, fitted well and supported well, can be excellent value. The expensive mistake is buying them before anyone has properly defined the job that they're supposed to do. That's how they end up in a drawer. And once they're in a drawer, well, it doesn't really matter how clever the technology was.